From the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, this is Nebraska Farmcast. I'm Ryan Evans, and today I am glad to be joined again by Glennis McClure, an extension educator and farm and ranch management analyst with our Center for Agricultural Profitability here at UNL. Glennis leads efforts on the biennial Nebraska Custom Rates Survey. The 2024 report was just published, which you can find on our website at cap.unl.edu/custom rates. In it, the survey compiles data from respondents across the state who provide current market rates for 138 different custom operations and services. Again, that is available on our website now at cap.unl.edu/custom rates. And in this episode, we're going to hear more about the report, how to use it, and how it can help both custom operators and those who pay for custom services here in Nebraska. Glennis, thanks for joining me again.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ryan. It's always good to actually have the report ready to go out because a lot of people are very, interested in the information that this particular custom rates report provides. And again, we do it every other year, so there's people anxiously waiting for it. So it's good to have it out.
Absolutely, yeah. We know that it's one of the most popular extension publications here at UNL and continues to be. So congrats on getting to the finish line on it once again.
I'm always glad.
And so if you could just give us a quick overview. I kind of talked a little bit about the custom rates report, but if people are not so familiar with it, what is it?
Okay. Well, and I do want to mention that also my colleague Jim Jansen, who is an extension educator, helps with the custom rates work. And together we go back and forth. There's a lot of data that we take off of surveys that we've gathered from online. So we have people that directly take the survey, grab that off of an online link, and then do that. Or we also have some that do it by paper. So all of that data then is accumulated, and we have a huge Excel file that we work from, and lots of sorting because we sort out, of course, all the different operations that folks do, but we also sort that by crop reporting district in Nebraska, which I think can be really helpful to folks. So like someone in eastern Nebraska might be, charging a certain rate, let's say for harvesting, but in western Nebraska, it's a different rate, or it could be. Sometimes they're very similar. Sometimes there's some differences. It's hard to know, but we do at least go to that extent. And it's just a lot of work to take that huge Excel file and get all the data, from it that we put into the report.
Yeah, it is so much data, and the survey respondents who are providing this for you, the data, are they generally custom operators themselves, or is it also some people who pay for custom services?
Right. So we ask for this particular custom rate survey, we ask folks that are actually doing the work, and what do they charge? So that's what we really focus on with this. And of course, there may be a few folks, we don't know all of them, but there might be a few that are actually paying for certain services that include that data. But really what we try to do is sort through and just have those that are charging, at least for this particular report. Now, when we did our livestock focused custom rates report a year ago, and we're going to try to do that every other year now, in between this, because that's a little bit more focused on those services that are livestock oriented. With that particular survey, and it was the first time for us doing that, we asked both those that were receiving services and those that were providing services to provide information on that. So again, but this one we stuck with our old tradition. This has been done for years and years and years. I don't even know how far back it's gone, Ryan, but we have, we're really asking those folks that are actually doing the work and what do they charge.
Okay, great. And before we go any further, we should probably mention that, of course, these custom rates are published every other year, and they are not necessarily, shouldn't be the be all end all rate, right? That
exactly. It's really a guide, and that's really, I think, really important for people to understand as they look at that information. Is that again? It's a market rate study. It's really what people are figuring that they need to charge, and it could it can really depend. We have some folks that only, let's say do a few acres. They might just do, let's say, planting for a neighbor. Okay. So are they charging that neighbor a full market rate? Maybe they're again, someday trying to maybe rent that land. And so they want to maybe charge a little less to that neighbor for some of the work that they do. So you can't always go off of what those charges are. We're hopeful that with good numbers, with enough people answering the survey, that we can get a really good idea of what those, general rates are across the state. Now, we do include in the report that range. So you'll see some fairly dramatic ranges sometimes. Somebody might be charging $15 for that operation, and someone might be charging for that same operation in a different location $45. So that's a piece of information that you can utilize, or that we can utilize, is what was that range. And then of course we do go into the average. We figure an average, but we also then include a most common rate, or a mode, you call it. So with that, if we have that, let's say we have 20 different respondents for an operation, and 5 of them chose the same rate. Then and the rest were all kind of all over the board, as far as rates. So we do include what that most common figure is. So that can give you an idea too, as you're looking at the report. And also we do include how many people reported. So obviously we've got some really popular operations, like a lot of harvest operations, a lot of planting operations. We got more numbers on those things, and that's good. The more we have, I think, the better the data is. But that you can tell by each operation, like how many people provided that data to us. Sometimes that number is pretty low, and sometimes it's a pretty good, strong number. So,
yeah, and that's understandable, because there are, like we said, I think 138 different custom operations. So there's probably undoubtedly certainly fewer people providing some of those more niche services.
Exactly.
So when people are setting their actual custom rates, or they're negotiating a custom rate to pay for a service, what are some other factors, if you can expand on those, that should be taken into account?
Right. So again, aside from this report, and again, using it as a guide, I do have people call quite often and are asking me, well, what's the going rate? What's the charge? I'm like, okay, well, here's what the report shows, but you really ought to understand your costs. And so I do include in the article that I've written for CAP here an example of kind of figuring what those operation costs would be. And it's operation and ownership costs of equipment. And we know these days that equipment has gotten pretty high priced in a lot of cases. Now, again, you might be utilizing some older equipment, and it was less costly for you, and that's fine. What are your costs? But then if you're also looking at replacing that, even like used equipment in recent years has been pretty high priced, or buying new, definitely. So you've got to figure in sort of those depreciation costs, as well as opportunity costs, and we call that ownership. Aside from operation costs like your fuel, your labor, the repairs that are ongoing with that equipment, that's all part of operating costs. And so I've got an example, in this most recent CAP article, where I ran through and actually put those numbers into our Ag Budget Calculator program, which we also have online there with CAP. But I put those numbers in to look at a planting operation. And, the tractor, a good-sized tractor, a large-sized tractor, we would say, you might be running $400,000, $500,000 tractor. Of course, you might not have paid for that much for it, less than that maybe if it was used. And that's part of the example that I figure here. And also a planter, just a 12-row no-till planter, and the cost of that. Ran through the calculations on that, like, again, how much fuel might this tractor use, per acre, and what's the coverage rate? So how many acres can I do in an hour and that kind of thing. So ran through those numbers, and it was interesting when I added, aside from that, those costs per acre for operating and ownership, I added in what we call, taxes, housing, insurance, licensing costs, if there are those with certain things. But obviously we pay insurance on our equipment. We have to, house that equipment. So we've got a shed cost. We've got property taxes that we pay. And, we consider those sort of overhead costs. So I added those in, and then I added like a 15% profit, because if I'm out doing the work and I'm making this my business, I might have some profit figure I add onto it. So it was interesting when that calculation was done, how it compared to something very similar in the custom rates. I'm always curious as to how close are some of those rates that are being reported to what might be an example of those actual costs to operate. And it was interesting in this case that I think we came out at like $25.46 is what you would charge for this planting operation, using the set of equipment that I talk about here, versus $25 was the average, basically the average rate that the custom report showed. So anyway, there's ways of calculating that, and I think it's kind of cool to be able to look at both, at what those costs are of your own, but also what other people are saying they might charge for something like that.
When you walk through that example, you use the Ag Budget Calculator program. So we encourage listeners to definitely, if they haven't already, to check that out. It's linked to in Glennis's article as well, and you can see how she walked through that example in the article. You can find that in the notes on the podcast here and on our website at cap.unl.edu. Glennis, are there any trends that stick out from this report in 2024? It's been 2 years since the last one was published, obviously. Mm-hmm. Any trends that come to mind or made you kind of look twice at?
Oh yeah, definitely. Thanks for mentioning that, Ryan, because I do talk about that a little bit, I guess, in the report. And in that, yes, pretty much all of there were maybe just a few of those sort of, let's say, common or popular operations that didn't really go up in price much, but we definitely saw where our custom rates charges, those rates went up over 2 years ago. So it makes sense again. Again, our fuel costs, we've had ups and downs with that for sure over the last couple of years. And so that's always a factor. We definitely have labor rates that have gone up. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to factor in a higher labor rate, you're probably going to have to charge a little bit more. But again, as I mentioned, it's the ownership cost of equipment has really gone up. So we'll definitely see some increases. And I think that's, it's just, part of the game to cover our costs if we're doing this kind of work.
Great. And so when somebody opens up the report, can you explain what to expect, just kind of how it's organized, what information they'll find in there in addition to what you've already mentioned?
Yeah, you bet. Well, we have a couple pages of narrative, just kind of giving an overview and a little bit of instruction, or just, again, like mentioning that we've got averages, we've got the most common or the mode, in these figures. But then the next couple pages, then we have a state summary, and that state summary really takes those operations that are most reported on. So anything that, this is where you'll find, again, just a quick hit on different operations. So, and then the report is organized basically in two parts. Besides the state summary, then we've got two parts. And the first part is sort of that more of those spring type operations. The tillage, the planting, some of the small grain harvest that we do before fall, some of the haying types of things there. And then the fall section is part two, and that is where we have most of our harvesting examples and operations there, hauling, other custom services, like what are folks charging for the use of their green bins, perhaps, okay? Heavy equipment, closing, pivot tracks or checking pivot tracks during the season. Also a little bit on tractor rentals. And we do a little section too on custom contract farming, because there's some of that out there too. And what are people charging on a per acre basis? So let's say if they're doing all of the field work for soybeans, planting, spraying, harvesting, and like what would those charges be? So that's included, in the report as well. So again, it's a pretty detailed report, a lot of different operations, and so hopefully it's easy for folks to read and to find what they need in the report.
Great. Well, it is a Herculean task to bring this together every 2 years. So for your work and Jim's work, we appreciate that. And you can find all of the information you need on custom rates in Nebraska here at CAP. That's cap.unl.edu/custom rates, including this new 2024 report, as well as the opportunity to sign up to be a survey participant right there. As Glennis mentioned, she makes it very easy on you now. So whether you want a paper copy or just to do it right there on your computer, it's all there at cap.unl.edu/custom rates. Thanks so much, Glennis.
Thank you. Thanks, Ryan.
Nebraska Farmcast is a production of the Center for Agricultural Profitability at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. For the latest research-based information and education resources to manage your farm or ranch operation, visit our website at cap.unl.edu. That's cap.unl.edu.